the SmallmouthCrush podcast. If you're a hardcore angler, you've come to the right place. This is a weekly podcast that will interview some of the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America. Travis and his guest will discuss what it takes to consistently catch big smallmouth, and you'll get a glimpse inside the mind of a trophy smallmouth angler. And now, here's your host of the SmallmouthCrush podcast, Travis Manson.
Yo, it's the SmallmouthCrush podcast. My name's Travis Manson. I hope everybody's having a great week. We're going to have another great podcast. We are talking with the top 52 anglers. This is a once-a-week podcast. 52 of the top smallmouth anglers in the country. I got another big stick joining me this week, Ryan Salzman. For guys that don't know anything about Ryan and I actually fish together quite a bit, even though he lives in Alabama and I'm up here in Pennsylvania. We do get to hang out and toss some big swim baits around every once in a while and catch some true giants. And if anyone follows him on the social media and takes a look at any of his Instagrams, Facebook, he's a guide down there. He catches them. He catches some big bags. So he's the perfect candidate for the show. We're going to be bringing him in shortly. In the meantime, I want to offer everybody out there a little discount code. So I buy all my tackle from The Real Shot, which is located up in Northeast Wisconsin. You can find the link to their website in the show descriptions. And if you use SmallmouthCrush 15, you're going to get 15% off your order. Help support small business. Help support the channel every time you do purchase tackle through them. It just helps the SmallmouthCrush podcast. So I certainly appreciate that. Let's get into it. Let's bring Ryan on. What's going on there?
Man, I've been fishing solid since the tour ended because I didn't have the best year on tour and had to make that guide money, Travis. So had a great first year, bad second year, had a learning year is what I like to say.
A learning year.
Growth
that makes
year.
Sense.
Sophomore year, growth year. Yeah, did a lot of dumb stuff. So how I explained it to people was I had a really good first year. I just was easing into it, wasn't pushing any limits, just like I'm trying to catch a bass. And this year, second year, like, oh, I kind of know the game, right?
Right.
So you push your limits a little bit. So that being said, it's all about the little things. I had a couple break-offs, cost me checks, had 6 fish, one tournament, cost me
one too many,
cost me 2 pounds of Lake Martin. And that dropped me 50 places to missing a check by a few ounces. Probably would have been top 20 there. That smallmouth, this goes against my smallmouth angling. However, guys, I want you to know I'm a southern smallmouth guy, and I got to get up more with Travis and play with these northern smallmouth. I lost probably 23 pounds of smallmouth on Erie day one. And that's because of my inexperience. Once again, a learning year.
Yeah.
After an awful year, to even have those fish hooked, I was like, it's happening,
Right.
You're getting the bites, you're around them. Long story short, I just had the wrong hook.
It's just that simple.
That's simple. I changed hook states. You never lost another fish.
Imagine that.
Oh my gosh. So we can talk a little more about that.
We're going to have to circle back around that for sure.
Yeah, but it was great. Day 2, never lost another fish. Only actually had 5 keeper bites. Caught 30 smallies on Erie, and only 5 keeper bites, which is kind of rare. Caught a couple of year fish, a couple walleye. But yeah, like you said, we'll circle back to that.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so Ryan, you're down in Alabama. You're fishing the Tennessee rivers a lot for these big trophy, huge smallmouth, like gigantic fish. I've seen the pictures on Instagram. You catch them, and so I think that's what our listeners really want to learn. So this is going to be a really good episode for anyone who wants to learn how you put some of these big fish in the boat day in and day out, because this is what you do for a living, and you have clients from all over the world, well, all over the country, maybe the world, that come down and want to jack on some of these big fish. So right off the bat, where's your favorite place to fish for smallmouth? If you could pick one body of water, where would that be?
Hands down for me, it's Pickwick Lake. However, a lot of people might argue Wilson Lake.
Okay.
The beauty of this area is it has trophy smallmouth below every tail race. The sleeper dam, to be honest, from what I hear, and guys may get mad for letting it out of the bag, but this is cool. It's Smallmouth
That's
Crush
what we
podcast.
do here. Yes.
That's what we do. So it's below Chickamauga on Nickajack. Apparently there's hordes of 5-pounders. Hordes. My buddy, and he's a hammer on the Coosa. These people listening may have heard of him, Bo Hunter. He goes up there regularly, and he told me he hooked one well over 9 one day, and he doesn't BS. He catches a lot of 7s up there. But I love Pickwick. That's where I cut my teeth smallmouth fishing. I always seem to catch them there. That's where my PB is. I caught an 8 even on the True Bass 5.5 that year before we fished 3 years ago now.
Dang. So big fish. Now, can you target smallmouth on that body of water pretty much year round? And then if so, what are the different techniques that you'll utilize throughout the season when you're chasing these big smallmouth? Let's start with pre-spawn and work our way through.
Okay. I think the favorite time of the year for anyone is pre-spawn. They're chewing. They got to get healthy to spawn. And they're the fattest that they'll be pretty much all year until, once again, full circle in the winter, which is pre-spawn again. Mm-hmm. So my favorite time of year, and I'm pretty exclusively targeting these fish with shad presentations. The Tennessee River, if you're not throwing a shad-style bait and there's current running, you're probably going to get beat.
Wow.
So that being said,
so no tubes, Ned rigs.
They'll work.
Come on, man.
They'll work, Travis. Hear me out.
Big gizzard shad. Is that where we're going with this?
When you're in a tournament, you just want 5, right? 5 of those bites. And especially team tournaments. So we got a big portion of this audience is probably fishing those team tournaments. If 2 of you in a pre-spawn event chunk a swim bait all day, or like say a jerk bait, or some kind of maybe a glide bait, might even be a mag draft. I've been playing around with a lot of fun stuff lately. Between the 2 of you, if you can't get 5, you just sucked that day and it wasn't your day. But if you get 5, you're going to be there. I mean, you're going to get the right bites, but a lot of times you're going to catch 10, 20, maybe even more if it's a great day like we've had. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have upwards of, 26 to 28 pounds of smallmouth. So that's my go-to. Alabama rig is always in play, right? When you're fishing, and you kind of separate, let's say Pickwick in the multiple sections. You have the tail race, right? And then, below the tail race, you call it the rest of the lake as far as smallmouth fishing. And you got a section with grass around Coger Island, so you call that Coger, and then you have Waterloo. But it all kind of fishes the same when it comes to smallmouth. You're just looking for those isolated high spots that kind of break current. And it's the same all the way through the lake. They're kind of roaming style fish. So once you get out of the tail race, you're rarely going to catch them in the same spot twice unless they're just fully staged, about to pull up somewhere and spawn. So out of the tail race, you've run and gun a lot of those Indian mounds and underwater humps. So, but that's where the A-rig comes into play more so than the tail race. Now, everybody throws the A-rig at the tail race. I almost exclusively throw a single these days. And even this fall, everyone's up there chunking an A-rig, and I didn't even expect to have a great day smallmouth fishing. I was like, let's just go try fishing some of these smallmouth places with a single swim bait, and had a phenomenal fall day fishing a single. And now the I go to is the Little Head 4.5 made by True Bass, and 99 problems. Like if there's ever one cookie cutter bait for a smallmouth, that's it. On a half ounce.
99 problems is the color of the swim bait. And what size is your go-to size?
It's called the Little Head 4.5. It's made by True Bass Swim Baits. And so a head color, I don't think matters. It's just a get bit. I think if they're very aggressive, the louder your head color will get you more bites. So that's a really cool little tidbit. So if they're kind of weird, I might stay with that gunmetal. But if they're feeding, I put on that pearl white head, something that's going to kind of glow in that water to get their attention. Some guys will take a little bit of chartreuse nail polish and put it under the throat there. It's a cool little trick. Now, when you're throwing it in the current, that thing is moving 2 miles an hour swinging. I'm not too worried about that. I'm more worried about profile as opposed to the little things. When you're out of the current, like I said, I think those little details matter more. And, because they got more of their instincts to use for them.
So that time frame when you're throwing these baits, you're throwing a single swim bait pre-spawn on Pickwick, generally what time of the year does that range? I know everything's weather dependent, but I mean statistics,
statistically
looking back, what are we talking exactly? Is it a 3 week? Is it a 5 week period? An 8 week period?
Well, your highest, let's just say like max, like if we're going to talk peak fishing, it's always going to be the third week of March to the first week of April, those 3 weeks. Now, when you're outside of that range, third week of February, you got stormy trend. But those, if you hit it right on some of those days, that's when you're going to break over 30, because that's when the giants bite. Like we might only get 5 bites in a day, but that's when I've seen the most 7+ caught. And then sometimes they're shallow, like in the horseshoe. So a lot of stuff a lot of guys don't talk about is they'll get in that slack water. They'll just go sun their eggs in that cold weather, and they'll just get on those shallow rocks. And that's when those little finesse crankbaits, like a little shad wrap, number 5s, those little bitty ones will catch the crap out of them. And even, I haven't thrown it in a while, but a hot mustard, Rapala, that fat 3-foot diver, their square bill.
Okay.
Throw it up there, just really thump, 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 and let it move some water up there shallow. But the key to that thump, I'm not really worried about the thump. I'm just wanting it to move slowly, because they're not real aggressive. They're just up there sunning their eggs in February. So, leading up to that prime swim bait time, that's when your other baits are going to play more for me out of the current. Now, if I'm in current, it's all about the shad. Once you get down the Coosa River, this is a smallmouth, and them spotted bass, they want to jig in that current. It's the craziest thing. And I've seen a lot of guys do it for smallies and have success, but they don't have the success of the single swim bait. And I think it's just a phenomena of the Tennessee River and how much shad they eat.
What's a typical size of a shad that you think they're feeding on? I mean, it ranges. I know there's.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 5 inches. That's why that 4.5-inch swim bait works so well. And then we have the head on it, which it's about a 1/2 inch. So I think the 5-inch shad profile is like
pre-spawn. The swim bait bite's going good. All of a sudden, water temperatures are rising. What do we do here?
Well, they're spawning. So they look for. I've seen them spawn as deep as 10 foot. Right, but we go through the cycles. If you guys know anything about smallmouth fishing, they follow sunlight, but they also follow water temperature. So the earliest spawners are going to spawn the shallowest. And then the late spawners are going to spawn the deepest, right, if they can get the sunlight to them. So if we have a good year where the water's not totally muddy, the smallies will be spawning all throughout the horseshoe, up and down the river channel edges, and those 8-foot, 10-foot rocks. And that's when your Ned rigs, your drop shots, your shaky heads, your smallie beavers, your tubes, that's when they play. And it's just, for me, it's a territorial bite. If you can just put it near them and let it sit long enough, they're going to bite it.
So after the spawn, so now we're post-spawn, these fish are recovering. And again, that spans probably, I'm guessing, I don't have as much experience down there as you do, but was it 4 to 6 week period perhaps?
Yeah, so we'll just call it a 6-week period total. You're going to have that prime swim bait bite where they're pre-spawning and starting to spawn at the same time, that mid-March. And then after the first week of April, the second week of April, they'll spawn heavy.
Okay.
And the third and fourth, they're like, it's just hot and heavy. New waves of fish keep showing up every week. This past year, we kind of had a cool spring, so it kind of tapered into the first week of May, but, into the first half of March through the end of April. So what's that, 6 weeks?
So then what happens? What are we doing after that? It's got to get challenging as it heats up and the summer comes into play. May, June, July in Alabama is pretty hot.
It can. So if there's a piece, in between, there's a lot of micro patterns that we get in the South that the North doesn't really have the luxury. They do, but it's so late that the Southern guys don't even probably realize that there's a shad spawn up there, I'm sure. But the shad spawn is next. So the problem with the after the smallie spawn, they get that roaming mentality. So what I tell people is to kind of stay more main river. If you can find the shad spawn main river, that's where your smallies are going to stay. The bluff walls, the shallower shelf bluff walls.
Okay.
The Indian mounds once again, and even the river bars, the grass river bars. And it's funny. You just be going down. You might be fishing half a mile with a chatterbait or a swim bait, and just boom, run into them. And then you just better put your power poles down and catch them while they're there, because then they're just swimming on down, and roaming around. And after that, they just go set up on a deep rock vein out in the middle of the river probably and sit there the rest of the summer. Because here's what happens. We'll be sitting there ledge fishing, Travis. Then all of a sudden, boom, 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 2 or 3 smallmouth, and then not another one the rest of the day. And I'm convinced those smallies were just swimming around and wanted to, if they joined the party for a minute, they were gone.
So it's hard to target them in the summer? Is that what you're saying? Or do you?
I don't really advertise trips in the summer. It can be done. I can do it. And I don't, and it's not to sound conceited. It's more challenging. So if you're a beginner fisherman, as a guide, I'm not going to advertise, come with me and catch smallmouth, or come with me and watch me struggle to get 3 smallmouth, but they might be good ones. So let's just say if you wanted to go target specifically smallmouth during summer hot, days.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm going to probably keep a topwater in my hand.
Okay.
Almost all day. And that is swim bait once again. And that jerk bait actually does real well too, but I'm talking fast, snapping it. That kind of stuff can really work. But then once again, you're hanging in the current, the tail race section, through 7 Mile, where that current's the most swift.
Okay. So you're still up towards the dam itself in that zone. Yeah.
So I moved, from basically fishing right below the turbines, essentially. I kind of drift back, down through the rest of the lake where there's still heavy current.
Okay.
And it's kind of right before it opens up, where it's still narrow enough to actually target a fish that he's going to be in that current seam right there if he's there.
Okay.
And there's several rock piles and mussel beds down through the end of 7 Mile that they relate to.
So I'm real interested in. It's something I've never done before. I haven't really talked to anybody that has done it, and I'm sure they do. Is there any type of night bite for smallmouth?
Oh my gosh. So I'm glad you said that. So it's something that escapes my mind a lot, Travis. And I wasn't even thinking about it when you talked about summertime smallmouth fishing. In college, that's all we did. If you want to catch smallies in the summer, this would be I don't know how we could film it.
Right.
Wilson Lake might be the best for this. And then Pickwick's pretty good, but if we're targeting strictly smallmouth, if you run the points on Wilson Lake with a nighttime spinnerbait, you're going to get your arm broke in the middle of June.
Wow.
And dude, you better bring stick. It's a good time. They will break your spinnerbaits. I mean, just 2 or 3 fish, put another one on. They're going to break it. Yeah,
all right, let's do it. So big spinnerbaits, single Colorado blades and darker colors. Is that what you're throwing?
Yep, and then sometimes this is funny. I'm letting out all my secrets, but I don't care because I don't night fish anymore.
Right.
We used to whack them on a 1/4 ounce jig with just a black and blue crawl trailer.
Okay.
Something that would fall really slow. We would do it on the calmer nights that had a good moon.
Sure.
And that thing was just falling real slow. All of a sudden, your line just jumps.
Wow.
It's fun. I forgot all about it. And, there's certain places that have lights that, that might be near a point that they set up in the shadows. And it's something that I want to get back into. But, you've done it. Once you travel, it's the last thing on your mind fishing at night. But it's a really fun experience.
Yeah, right. What would you say your strengths when it comes to smallmouth fishing on the rivers would be? I mean, I'm going to go on a limb here and say it's a swim bait.
Okay.
But besides the swim bait, what else do you think you have really high confidence in as far as a bait that you're throwing for these fish?
So I'm glad you brought that up. And I learned from guys, this was passed down, Sonny Carter. And if you're watching this and you ever heard of Sonny Carter, high five. He passed away probably 10 years ago, but he was probably the best smallmouth angler. He's right up there with Leon Tidwell. Have you heard of Leon Tidwell? Fish Bass Master.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, he passed away, a while back too. But dude, the grub, the smoke grub. And that was the hollow body swim bait before the hollow body swim bait. And even through sassy shads. But dude, you can go out there actually year round with the smoke grub, 3/16, 1/4 ounce head.
Right.
Pitch it out there, drift in the current, bounce that thing on the bottom, and they're going to eat it. It'd be a cool challenge video to do.
Are you saying that's one of your strengths?
Yeah, for sure.
A
That's
grub.
what I did. A grub, yeah. A grub yeah.
You're a grubber. I didn't know that.
But grubs, see, it should be obvious. Grubs and swim baits for me are like synonymous.
You put it that way, yes, but
I mean, okay, so look, away from a grub, or it's basically a swim bait for me. Drop shot.
Okay.
In college, I loved drop. My buddy called me a little like an Ellie because I was out there catching in smallmouth, like acting like an idiot, running around screaming, being an idiot. I had so much fun in college, but and then a jerk bait. So I would say drop shot and a jerk bait. And like right now, there's days they won't touch an Alabama rig. There's days I can only get bit on a jerk bait. You got to find the color, the retrieve speed,
sure.
How long to let it pause. But there's days they will not touch a swim bait, and you got to be jerking for them.
What would be an area that you would like to improve upon as a smallmouth angler? Some challenges, whether it be a technique or maybe specific bodies of water. Where do you think your weakness lies when it comes to smallmouth fishing?
Tube.
A tube, okay.
Yeah, wow. I actually improved upon that on Erie, and I got a lot more confidence in it. But the tube is a very specific technique. There's actually multiple ways to fish a tube. And I'm sure snapping a tube, dragging a tube, almost swimming a tube. There's all those techniques work, and that is where I'm least experienced. Just because of where I come from, we're power fishing for them. And if you throw a tube up in the horseshoe, good luck.
Okay.
So that's pretty much why I don't throw it. And now you can get the stupid tubes and Texas rig them, but if they'll eat a Reaction Innovation Somali beaver on a 3/16 pound shaky head, why wouldn't you do that?
Gotcha.
It's a little easier, stage rigged, so I don't have to fight it. But if you're in areas like up north where you can present the bait, that's one of the most effective baits for smallmouth. There was no other bait I found up north that they would just track for forever. And you could, when I was snapped, you just bring the whole school back to the boat. And I found a lot of my best areas. I'd be chunking that thing out and just ripping it and then letting it fall. And you can see, it's really clear up there. See the whole school. Oh, it was like a kid candy store up there, man. It was so fun.
So getting back to some of the different ways to throw these baits that you have high confidence in. So obviously the true bass swim baits is coming into play. We talked about the grub a little bit. So let's hit on the swim bait itself. So when you have this rigged up, what is your rod and reel as well as line setup for anyone that wants to, let's say they're going to plan a trip down the Tennessee River and they want to start throwing these swim baits. Where does one start? Okay, so one needs to start with the rod and reel. We're going to start from the bottom and build up. No less than 17-pound fluorocarbon for me. Okay. And mainly because you're around those rocks with that swim bait. And then the go-to head is a 1/2 ounce True Lock swim bait head made by True Bass. And we made that bait for that 4.5 True Bass and the 5.5. But it snugs up so perfect to it. It's seamless. There's almost no gap. Sure. And you don't need super glue. So you need those two things, and it's going to save you a lot of money and super glue and time. Well, it is a screw lock, right? So that helps right there. Now, as funny as this sounds, there may be some people that have never used a screw lock before. Okay. And so I know a lot of people are listening to us on the podcast, so we don't really have a visual for you, but can you kind of walk us through on how you would rig that bait? Pretend I'm a blind person and you're trying to explain that to me, basically. Okay, I'm going to close my eyes. Right. So here we have the swim bait in one hand and a jig head in another. What you want to do is lay the swim bait over the hook of the jig head, and you want to feel where that or see where the hook comes out. Okay. Right. And so you've kind of measured it out. So you see where the tip of the swim bait meets, the jig head. Sure. And then you hold that place with your thumb where you marked it, and then you put a little nick on the side of the swim bait. Now what you want to do is come down the center of the nose of the swim bait and stay in that hollow cavity. And it's really crucial to rig your swim bait straight, guys. It's all about the action. So come out where you made that little tick mark, and then thread it slowly up to the spring. Do not shove it above the spring. Sure. And what you want to do is kind of start threading it, lefty loosey, righty tighty. I pull it to the left a little bit. I push and twist.
And then what I do is I pull the tail in front of the hook,
Yep.
push and twist slowly, not a lot. Just let it thread itself. Pull the tail in front of the hook, push and twist 3 to 4 times.
3 to 4 times, sure.
Correct. And then what I like to feel is by the last turn, it's fighting it. And then I take it past it a little bit, and then I'll center it back up, and it's just snug right up against that head.
Sure.
And I'm not lying to you guys. You will catch 20 to maybe even 40 fish on a swim bait before you got to put a new one on.
Yep. I've experienced that with those baits. It really, truly is probably one of the best swim baits for the Tennessee River fish, for those current fish, to mimic a gizzard shad, to mimic the bait fish properly, to fish it in that current. I don't know of a better system. I've seen it firsthand. 17-pound test line's pretty heavy for a northern boy like me, but I get it.
For real, dude. Okay. Well, I even threw 20 with you. Like when we're catching them that good, the night before I'm pulling 20 on because it's not going to matter. And you know what is going to? I'm just going to boat flip them.
Sure.
Most of the time. You know, when I'm not giving a crap, I boat flip them. We land them all. When I care, I'm like, Travis, get the net. And he's like, we don't need no stinking net. But no, it's all good fun. But I have a lot more confidence in landing them and boat flipping them with that higher line. If they hit a rock, I'm not too worried about it. And fun fact, I actually boat flipped my 8-pounder that year.
Wow.
I didn't know it was 8 pounds. When they jumped, they just all look like fat 6-pounders.
Sure.
And then his fatness went all the way through his tail.
Right.
And then it kind of hung up on the side of the boat. And my client was like, oh, my gosh. And then you kind of walk it back and slide it over. But anyways, back to the setup. 7-1-1 for that current. And then I'm throwing a 7-3 to 7-6. Medium heavy to heavy. And if there's a lot of current, I'm gravitating more towards that heavy because you got your line is the more current, guys, you got to think about how much your line is bowed. You may feel like your line is taut or tight, but your line is going to be out there drifting in the current. And imagine your bait being 20 feet away from where you think it is at any given time. So when you set that hook, there's a constant pressure of that water pressure holding that line kind of taut. But when you pull, some of that's going to cut into the current, right? So you got to have a stiff enough rod to get that hook in those fish.
Okay.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. Sure.
And if you have too light of a rod, you're just going to have it and just mush mouth in it, and they'll come up and spit it each time.
And I'm sure you've had the experience that you've played around with different rods all the time out there. And so if you had to pick now, let's say we got to take one. Is it going to be then just a heavy?
I got an exact rod, dude. I've been playing with rods. I went out and I got a Champion Extreme. The 744 Champion Extreme is the perfect swim bait rod.
Gotcha. Sure.
For all around, offshore, up there in the current, it does it all amazing. So if you're wanting to spend, $350 and just get an amazing swim bait rod, that's the one.
All right, so when it comes to different size swim baits that are out there, obviously you guys have a lot of different in the True Bass lineup sizes. They can get a little overwhelming. I never know which one's the best size, what I should be throwing, when I should be throwing it. So I'm going to rely heavily on you when it comes to these fish in the Tennessee River. Where do I start? What's like the best size?
So I think that based on the 30 minutes we've talked, that people have probably gathered that the 4.5-inch little head is probably the best size.
Okay.
And if you're just getting into swim bait fishing, you don't know what to pick, you're on the website, get that one. Get it in 90, my 3 colors, get it in 99 Problems, Winter Minter, and then Citron. Like that's your phase 3. It's going to get the job done. Now, there are times Green Bean works, True Blue works. Don't worry about all that. They all work. That's what you care about. So use the ones you like. Those are the ones I like. And then as far as the rest of the sizes, so we have those same colors in the rest of the sizes. So that kind of solves that question. And the tougher the bite, either the lighter the head I'll use and fish it slower.
Okay.
Or I will downsize to the 3.5. And I'm guilty of really just being hard-headed and continuing to throw the big baits. It's amazing how when they cut that current off, if you will take a 1/4 ounce 3.5 minter and just slow reel it and take those rocks, the size of smallmouth you will catch.
Okay.
It's amazing.
When the bite's tough is what you're saying.
Correct. When that
When they're
bite's
not
a
as
little tough.
active, you're going to pick up that real small swim bait,
Yep.
and you're just same deal. You're fishing in the same places. We're
Yep.
just going
Spinning rod.
a little bit slower. Interesting. Okay.
Spinning rod. I'm throwing a 15-pound braid. I normally throw 10, but if I'm throwing a swim bait, I throw a 15-pound braid.
Okay.
And I'll do a 12-pound fluorocarbon leader. Do about 6-7 foot leader on that. I tie an Alberto knot because I'm not good enough to tie an FG. I need Travis to teach me. And other than that, and especially even when they're spawning, Travis, I'll take that 3.5 like in the morning times, like when I feel like they might be a little hungry or you're just looking for a pack of beds.
Yep.
Just get out there and just slowly wind it. If you get bit, hit spot lock, mark a waypoint, come back later, throw the shaky heads. That's a good way to search for some beds, because I feel like they're going to run that thing off too, especially in the lower light hours.
Sure.
That's a good time to throw that little one. And now the big ones, right? You were wondering?
Well, I'm just curious, do they have a place in the southern smallmouth arsenal? Like what's the biggest one you make?
The 7.5. So
okay. Tell me a smallmouth's going to bite that. Will they?
100%.
Okay.
So the first year I launched True Bass, my favorite thing to do as a guide, and I'm sure you experience with this, when you're out there every day, it gets a little monotonous. So you try different things, right?
Sure. Yep.
When you're catching them almost at will on a 4.5-inch sunbait, you want to have fun. I'm like, I want to see if they'll bite this thing. First, Travis, I kid you not, my first cast, 3/4 ounce 8/0 hook, pale chicken. So I have a color called pale chicken. Okay. It's basically a really natural kind of translucent shad pattern. First cast, catch a 4.5 pounder, and it is gone. Just sucked down the throat of that smallmouth. And that was one of the years that I had even clients throwing that bait. Like we go behind people. It's just, I think it, like you kind of spoke to earlier, it depends on the class of shad that year. That year we had a very big class of shad, no shad kill. So they would really eat that big bait. And I would notice with that 8/0, they try to eat it head first. So we catch them in the outside of the cheek because they suck it in head first, right?
Sure.
And that big hook would just gaff from outside coming in.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that gets me excited knowing that. That's pretty cool.
Oh, it was so fun. And
if those of you haven't seen these swim baits, I mean, that's a big piece of plastic there.
It's big. I mean, it's huge. I mean, it's with a head, it's every bit of 8 inches. So think of an 8-inch mag draft, same size bait, huge bait. And it's something I'm glad I haven't done it the last 2 years, mainly because I didn't have much time. This year we had COVID, it was very limited. The year before you came up and filmed, we wanted to have a good show, catch them. I think this will be the year I'm going to catch some big ones on the 7.5 again.
Yeah, that'll be exciting.
Wilson Lake too. Traveler, you like to fish a little bit up there?
That was fun, sure.
They'll eat the crap. In the edge of that current, I'll be throwing it thinking I'm going to catch a smallie, 6-7 pound largemouth out of nowhere. Smokes it. Yeah.
Man, that's got to be fun. I can't wait to get back down there. All right, let me ask you one final question. And this is what I ask everybody who's on the podcast, because I think it's an important question, because it's a question that really gets into your head as far as what's the most effective bait that you utilize to catch big smallmouth. And so the question is, if you could use one bait for smallmouth ever again, and it's the only bait you could use, what are you picking?
It's got to be the little head 4.5 and green bean.
A swim bait.
The swim bait, baby.
You would, from the south, say a swim bait. So the 4.5 green bean color.
Mm-hmm.
Why green bean?
Green bean, mainly because it's been a killer color on the Tennessee River the last few years.
Okay.
And that's what we catch them on up north when we go there too. I don't know if it's mimicking the alewife, if it's green. They're just smallmouth. They see that green up there, like, we eat green things.
Right. Sure.
I don't know.
I guess it could mimic a perch as well. I can see that.
Sure. I heard Brandon Pollen give a great piece of advice on glide baits, and I think it applies to any kind of swim bait.
Okay.
You got to look just enough like something they could eat.
Interesting.
Like especially if you got it moving or you got it above them, there's the right conditions. If it looks enough like it, it's going to work most of the time.
Well, it's not the answer I was expecting, but obviously you're a swim bait fanatic. You know what you're doing when it comes to big smallmouth. What's the best 5-fish bag? I know we talked about your personal best, but what's your heavy, whether it be in a tournament or just out fun fishing? Have you hit the 30-pound mark?
Yeah.
You have.
Oh, for sure. Are we talking just smallies?
Just smallies, yes.
So the day I caught the 8 even, we had 31.96. However, we actually broke 32 the week after that, and we had right under 33. And that was with solid sixes, like just fatties.
Yeah, 6 and a quarters.
That was that year. You saw the class of fish we caught. Like, there's classes of fish that come up through these dams, and we're on this year is going to be pretty amazing. And you just hit the right class of fish. Here's a lot of 30-pound bags weighed in.
Hope to get down there this spring with you. It's I enjoyed it. I wasn't expecting what we ran into on our trips down there, as far as just the size and the fish, how they reacted to that swim bait. You know, as a northern smallmouth fisherman primarily, it's a totally different way of fishing, something I'm totally not used to. So if anybody's looking for a variety or something a little different, but still along the lines of some big smallmouth, a trip down south and a guide trip with you, they'll learn a whole bunch about Tennessee River smallmouth fishing that day. That much I can guarantee. If people want to book a trip or learn a little bit more about you, Ryan, what's the best way that they can find you?
The best way you can find me is just go to my website, alabamabassguide.com, and check me out on social media, ALBassGuide_meme lord. If you guys like memes, morning funnies, I post memes to my stories every morning just for fun.
What do you say to that?
What do you say to that other than that?
There's nothing you can say. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show. I know you're going to be joining us on some lives coming up in the future. You're one of the regular guests on the SmallmouthCrush YouTube channel. So if you guys haven't seen that yet, head on over to YouTube, SmallmouthCrush. We got a lot of educational videos as well as some tournament videos. And, of course, this podcast, you'll be able to watch it on the YouTube channel, and you'll see guests like Ryan in his interesting hat he's wearing here that you guys can't hear. What's the story behind that? So he's wearing like this Hawaiian, flowery-looking, pretty cool lime green hat with a camouflage hoodie. I don't get you sometimes.
Man, I'm a peacock, Travis. You got to let me fly, man.
I guess so.
So the story on the hat, really quick. I love the hat, and I bought one. I made a post. Apparently, a lot of people liked them too, went and bought some, and now they're a sponsor for 21. And I'm really excited.
Really? So what's the name of it?
Shaka Kai. Ever heard of Shaka, bro? Shaka, it's a surfer thing. So it's a beach company, but they're in all kinds of fishing. What's really cool, you'll see me wear them on tour this year, big straw hats, which I love. So they got amazing big straw hats. Got the little cool hang loose symbol on it, and they're just fun. Got beach towels, really cool buffs. Summer fishing gear. Check them out. ShakaKai.com.
All right, I just want to thank Ryan for coming on the show. We'll see you down the road, Ryan. Appreciate your time. Thanks for all the good advice. I know a lot of people listening are going to get their hands on some of these swim baits and start catching some big fish down the Tennessee River. And as always, until next time, we'll see you guys on the water.
Thanks so much for listening today. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show and follow us on Instagram at SmallmouthCrush. Also, the YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and comment with a review below. And as always, until next time, we'll see you on the water.